You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.
Welcome back to On the Way Home, the podcast where we explore the people, systems, and ideas shaping the future of housing and community. I'm your host, Emmy Kelly, and today I'm joined by Michelle Parisien, Director of Tenant Experience Operations at Ottawa Community Housing. Michelle leads day-to-day service delivery across a large and complex housing system with a focus on improving tenant outcomes through strong system design, continuous improvement, and people-centered operations. Her work reminds us that great housing services are not built on individual heroics, but on thoughtful systems that supports both tenants and staff. Let's listen in. Thanks so much, Michelle, for joining us on the show today. We're really excited to have you on, and maybe we'll jump right into the first question of what does home mean to you?
Thanks so much for inviting me. Home for me is really where your nervous system can stand down at the end of the day. It's the place where you get to recharge, reset, and feel most like yourself. And in social housing, that idea becomes very real because we serve tenants for whom stability isn't always guaranteed. And when housing isn't stable, everything else becomes fragile. So home isn't really just a unit; it's a psychological safety place. When stability is threatened, whether it's it could be something small like maintenance issues or something larger like financial stress, that impact can be quite disproportionate. And so a small disruption in housing can ripple into many other parts of someone's life. When I think about home, I think about predictability. I think about knowing where I'm going and what I'm going to get when I get there, and the ability to plan ahead instead of feeling like I'm in survival mode. So that's really why this work matters. We're not just managing buildings, we're protecting stability for people.
You oversee day-to-day operations for a massive housing system. From your perspective, why do service delivery models matter more than organizational charts when it comes to tenant experience?
So an org chart tells you who people report to. It does not. It doesn't tell you where the work is going to flow. And a service delivery model is the opposite, and it's showing you where the work actually moves through the system. And tenants don't experience reporting lines. They experience how long it takes to get an answer to their question or a response. They experience whether they have to repeat themselves multiple times. They experience whether someone clearly owns a problem that is brought to them or whether it drifts. And that's how they walk that path every day with the organization. When accountability and decision rights are not clear, even excellent people will deliver inconsistent service. So in large systems, we sometimes assume that if the structure's in place, the work will just happen. But an org chart doesn't tell you how to triage a new issue, and it can't give you the answer to who's going to follow up or what happens when something falls through the cracks. So that's where this service delivery model is incredibly important. And the flows need to be designed intentionally so that the system can default to solving the issue. A strong service delivery model removes ambiguity in the process, and it clarifies ownership and it reduces handoffs. So it aligns the roles to the outcomes, not just tasks.
People often hear lean and think tools, templates, and efficiency hacks. How do you apply lean in a people-centered public service environment without losing the human side of the work?
It's a great question. Lean is often misunderstood. It's people hear it and they think, oh, this is cost cutting, or we're going to go much faster at the expense of people. But it really isn't about moving faster. It's really about removing friction. In housing, friction looks like a tenant explaining their issue 3 different times, a staff member chasing missing information, a work order being reopened because the problem wasn't solved the first time because the intake details weren't clear. So when we apply lean, we ask, okay, where in the system is this being made harder than it needs to be, both for tenants, but also for staff, because they're the ones executing, right? We focus on quality at first touch. We look for clear standard work for predictable processes. Root cause is so important instead of just fixing the surface. And we use data to be able to show us where that friction is happening. We don't use lean to blame people, but we use it to find the patterns that are broken that the system is creating. When the system improves, the human experience improves. So staff feel less overwhelmed, they aren't firefighting preventable issues, and tenants feel respected because their issue moves cleanly through the process. Lean, can be used however you think it should be used, but really when it's done properly, it protects capacity.
In large systems, standardization can improve quality, but housing work also requires judgment and flexibility. How do you balance consistency with the need for staff to respond to real human situations, like in your operation?
So standardization should handle the predictable. Judgment is handling the complex. A large part of the work that we do is repeatable. Move-ins, arrears, escalations, inspections. These are all things that are just happening constantly in a system. So this is repeatable work. It's predictable. That's where the standardization comes in. When processes aren't clear, staff spend way more energy than required reinventing decisions that should already be designed, and that takes them away from being able to deliver at a high quality. When we standardize predictable work, we free up the capacity for them to have the time to deal with the more complex using empathy and professional judgment. So without standards, everything feels urgent and custom, but with standards, things feel fair and people actually have room to think and apply that judgment in those complex situations.
Michelle, I've kind of realized while we're talking that we've dove right into your areas of expertise. And I wanted to ask if we can just backtrack for our listeners and you tell us a little bit about what day in the life looks like for you and what journey brought you into this place, and just maybe share a little bit with our listeners about you, why you're here, what you do, before we continue kind of going on to all the great knowledge that you're sharing.
Absolutely. So I started at the organization at Ottawa Community Housing just over 17 years ago in a very entry-level role. I was completely new to the industry. Before joining OCH, I did not even know social housing existed in our city, in our province, in our country. I did not know about this structure at all, and it was just an opportunity to go to work. And I immediately learned a lot more than I was bargaining for. Obviously, it is a very complex and absolutely necessary system in our world. And through working in this very entry-level position, I had brought knowledge from my previous employment in the private sector and said, we could do this better. We could do this faster. This work here is, this is really painful for me and I'm not helping people. I'm not serving anyone by doing this. And so I was able to make small incremental improvements and move on to the next role and sit back and observe, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And learn the business from really the front line, growing through my career. So that transitioned into leadership around 8 years ago. My role encompasses all operations when it comes to properties and people. We're delivering property management and maintenance services. We're delivering core service delivery functions, call center management, integrated pest management, and we're also delivering all the rent and lease functionality. So now we've been able to introduce lean organizationally over the last 10 years to make larger system improvements, building off of the design of small incremental change to apply it to models that allow us to have a much bigger impact. And resources are very scarce in our world. So, you know, they're always needed, right? There's always more work. There's never a moment where we say, oh, we solved it, we've moved on, and we're not going to be getting any more work. That doesn't happen in our world. So being able to create that capacity within our current resources is almost impossible if we're not using a system to streamline what we're doing.
You've said that service quality is driven by system design, not individual heroics. Can you walk us through a real example where changing the system had more impact than asking staff to try harder?
Yeah, absolutely. In 2022, just after the pandemic, we were noticing in our rental calculations stream that we had a growing backlog of documents. And this was creating havoc for the tenant, right? So they would submit their annual household review form, and then they would wait and not hear back. And so they would call and they'd be stressed, there'd be anxiety, they would show up. This was multiple touch points for them to be able to resolve something that used to be fairly simple. And the traditional response in the past would have been to tell staff, okay, we need to work overtime, we need to push through this volume, we need to dig deep, we need to work harder. And what was happening was that obviously that mentality doesn't work. Staff were burning out, and we could see it. You know, there was the obvious, and then there was the measured through, you know, employee engagement, employee retention. It was quite obvious that that was what was happening, and we knew that we had to dig deep into this one. So when we looked really closely at what the root cause, and root cause is found, it's really at the root. You can't ask once and find out, oh, this is why it's happening. No, you have to go very deep to get it. It was not about effort. It was about flow. And the staff believed it was about effort because that's how they had always gone through this process. When something was building up, they would just dig deep. Or they would say, you know, we need to add more resources. We need to steal from here and add more bodies to do this thing. But adding more people to do work that doesn't flow doesn't get it done any faster. It just perpetuates the issue. The flow in this case was files were being parked because intake wasn't structured for completion. It was structured for, you know, I'll take it and we'll park it and we'll get to it later. If the documentation was incomplete, the work would stop completely. We would have to go back to the tenant. The tenant would have to bring more information. It was start, stop, and that was what was causing this backlog. So we changed it. We removed this barrier. We stopped focusing on how many files were moving and started focusing on whether they were actually getting finished. So if something was preventing completion, we solved that barrier immediately. We're having that conversation as we're receiving the document saying, oh, you're missing this, or oh, you need to sign here, and being able to then take this completed information and do it right away. So this, we went from a place where we were barely meeting our legislative requirements on processing of 30 days to a place where now nothing is later than 3 days. That backlog completely removed itself in the course of 6 months. And staff stopped having to dig deep to get work done. They were able to address the predictable and spend that time on the complex. That's system design versus heroics in practice.
That's pretty impressive. And I'll just go back to what you were saying about burnout. It is real. in frontline and operational teams. How do you design roles, workflows, and accountability structures that protect staff capacity while still improving service quality for tenants?
So we really believe that burnout, and when I say believe, I mean we put this at the forefront of our activity. So burnout is a belief for us is not a resilience issue. It's a design issue. It happens when demand exceeds control. It happens when accountability is unclear, and when effort isn't leading to visible progress. Those are all factors that are leading to that burnout moment in this capacity. Or yeah, we focus on right sizing, clarifying, and removing low value administrative work by streamlining it or automating what can be automated, so that we have that bandwidth for that work that does need the judgment, that does need the complex. And it isn't a one-time exercise. If you streamline something, you may actually inadvertently cause a downstream impact, depending on the scale of the process that you're reviewing. So pressure can show up somewhere else. You do need to keep redesigning. It is continuous improvement for a reason. But you can't coach your staff out of a structural misalignment. And trying to do that can actually cause that burnout. So protecting that staff capacity is the operational responsibility that we've put at the forefront of the program.
Very cool. Large scale transformation often sounds great on paper, but can feel overwhelming on the ground. How do you lead big changes in service delivery without losing trust or momentum with staff?
So it's been my experience that people don't really resist change, they resist confusion. If they can't see the problem that we're solving, or it would just feel like extra work, or it doesn't really, we haven't created the burning platform based on their experiences to be able to be meaningful in your change. We're very focused on clarity. So, for someone who isn't looking at the complex, we would be asking, saying, okay, what's broken? Where's the friction? Or as Alain would say, the pebble, what's the pebble in your shoe? And how will this make your day better? And that's kind of the core beginning pieces for connecting the changes that you're making back to the work and how it impacts them, what's in it for them. We listen, and you can't just listen and take notes. You have to really show that you're listening by making actionable change. We adjust, we make these adjustments and say, you told us this, we've taken that feedback and here's what we're doing. We heard you, and your voice is really important. You are walking this process or this path or this experience with our tenants every day. So how can we make it better for everyone? And then focus really quickly on early relief. So if we're able to paint the story that this part is actually easier, we can build trust with our employees, and they'll be more willing to go through the harder changes, the bigger scale changes with us.
You're deeply invested and interested in organizational design and workforce development. What's one change leaders can make right now to set their teams up for continuous improvement, not just one-off projects?
I would say that one change would be to stop celebrating volume metrics. So stop celebrating busyness. A lot of organizations or a lot of leaders can accidentally, unintentionally reward volume. So that can, you did X number of emails or you touched this many files, and that's the measure of success that they're working towards. But if you want continuous improvement, you have to celebrate different things. You have to ask different questions, and the focus needs to be on if we're solving issues the first time we touch them, or are repeat problems going down? Are we stabilizing situations faster? And at the end of the day, what we keep asking ourselves is this actually getting better? And if it's not, then we have to come back and do that, go all the way to the root again and figure out what went wrong so that we can improve it.
I love that. I think that a number of the things you've said are like very like clarifying for how we work, but rewarding volume is certainly a key thing to monitor, that we're not doing that. And for leaders listening who might feel stuck in reactive mode, it happens a lot in a line of work where, you know, you're kind of performing service delivery. What's one practical shift we can make this month to start building a culture of continuous improvement and shared accountability?
I would say, I think the most meaningful thing you could do right away is to pick one reoccurring frustration, whether it's, it should have your client at the center of it, and bring your team together and find out, why does this keep happening? But don't stop at the first answer. You can do a little research into the 5 whys. It's a very important part of getting to root cause. But asking, why does this keep happening, and getting an answer, and then going under, okay, but why does that keep happening? And keep going all the way till you get to that root. Most reoccurring problems are structural, whether not necessarily in the structure. When I use that word, I don't mean org, I mean in the process. So it could be unclear handoffs, it could be unclear standards, it could be ownership. Fix one structural issue this month, and then do it again next month. And at the end of the year, you'll have 12 improvements that you can look back and say, okay, now we've changed things. Now we've made it better for the client. Now we've made it better for the employees. What you've built that trust, and you've figured out what more you can do, and you'll be able to put that into practice. It doesn't have to be a massive transformational plan. It just needs to have discipline to go fix one root cause for your client at a time.
So do you like coach or mentor organizations in this work?
So our organization implemented a quality standardization program last year called OCH Elevate. We are in the process of formalizing this methodology across our entire organization. We're absolutely looking, whenever there's an opportunity for us to share how we can be more effective, or how we've applied it to be more effective, and how we can help them. We're always taking those opportunities. So social housing providers are taking note and asking questions, and we're there to guide them.
So if anyone wants to get in touch to get support with some of the strategies you mentioned, what's the best way to do so?
Please reach out on LinkedIn. It's a great way to reach out to myself or Alain Kedzier at Ottawa Community Housing, and we'll connect you with our OCH Elevate program.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today. Super appreciate the conversation and the clarity and the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Housing is deeply personal. It's infrastructure, but it's also deeply human. And when we are purposeful in building design systems that respect both, tenant experience and staff well-being improve.
Agreed. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Today's episode featured Michelle Parisien, Director of Tenant Experience Operations at Ottawa Community Housing, whose work highlights the critical role of system design in shaping both tenant experience and staff well-being. Her perspective underscores that meaningful, lasting improvements in housing services come from building strong, people-centered systems, not relying on individual effort alone. Thank you for listening to On the Way Home. Stay with us for more conversations with leaders working to strengthen housing and community across the country.
You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.